Hi everyone. Oh man, what an episode. We scheduled for an hour, but we spoke for over 2 hours. If you don't know Khush already, you'll remember her after this episode. Khush is a lecturer, principal of a college, homeopath and nutritional therapist. We talk about toxicity, detoxification processes and how nutrition should be personalized through health coaches in the 21st century. Also, don't forget to like, share, follow and subscribe to keep this channel going. Thank you so much and enjoy. There you go. Yeah. So yeah, you were saying that you do posts and things like that. It's not about to sell. It's just literally passing on the message, more or less, right?
Yeah, so even when I do, when I've posted on the recent one was on omeprazole, and that post was because I had just seen a client who is on so many medications, but a lot of them will start with one medication. And that's fine because you know what? If somebody's got type 1 diabetes and they need insulin, they need insulin. You're not going to sit at home and try to balance your blood sugar and take homeopathic remedies and nutritional remedies to try and cure your type 1 diabetes. And nobody says that we are curing. It's the body that cures. When the body's in the right environment, whether the physical environment, the nutritional environment, energetically, the body can heal. It's just giving it the right materials. But if you've got somebody who needs a hormone, you need insulin, you're not going to give that in a nutrition form. And it's about being mindful. But when people start on a medication, for example, omeprazole, we ask the question first, why is there acid reflux? And omeprazole is a very common medication. And sadly, it's also being prescribed to children, young children.
Wow.
But, we ask, why does somebody have acid reflux? What's the reason? Is it stress? How many of us will go to the doctor and we have acid reflux, and does the doctor ever say, are you stressed? I mean, some doctors may do that, which is great, but the question is, are you stressed? Are you constipated? Because constipation can cause acid reflux. Certain medications, if you're taking certain medications, can cause acid reflux. There's so many reasons. Being low in magnesium can cause acid reflux. There's so many reasons that can cause acid reflux that it's not an omeprazole deficiency. It's something else.
Or a Gaviscon deficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think part of it is we do live, I always say this to the students as well, 21st century lifestyle, it's go, go, go. And some people say, and then they make time, they slot in time for meditation, they slot in time to go for a walk, and it's all like checking the tick list. But this whole movement towards being self-compassionate and mindfulness, and it might be overused, the word mindfulness, the word being self-compassionate, but it's so important because even practitioners burn out. They're giving so much, but we don't look after ourselves. What are we doing to not necessarily slow down, but how are we living our daily life? It's just, I think even with nutritional therapy, the students that are studying at the school right now, say to them that you could, out of this 2-year diploma course, you may choose to actually connect with a few pharmacists, with a few doctors, and say, I would just like to go through their medication with them and see, are there any contraindications? What are the nutrient depletions? And that could save so many issues, health issues from happening in the future. So certain medications, I mean, birth control pill, a typical example.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying don't take the birth control pill. That's, the woman's choice, man's choice whenever that comes out, whatever.
I read that it can actually, when women who take the birth control pill, it can attract them to the wrong person.
Huh. Okay. I mean, if you think about it, what you're doing is one, yes, some people, I did a post, this is a while back, about the birth control pill and the nutrients it depletes. And then I did have some backlash about, well, this is women's rights and it's, freedom for, which is absolutely true. Gone are the days where you suddenly fall pregnant, you don't have the birth control pill and you fall pregnant. I mean, women still fall pregnant if they're on the birth control pill. It's not full, 100% proof. But the important thing is, like you just said, one is what is the birth control pill doing? Okay, how is it kind of tweaking the hormones or making the body think that it's pregnant or it's having a period? You take certain pills, you stop and then you have the bleed and then you restart it again. So you're actually controlling your hormonal system externally. Now, if you're controlling it externally, it's bound to have certain side effects, but the birth control pill has sadly nutrient depletions, for example, B12, zinc, vitamin C, and the folate. These are all very important for conception. So if a woman is taking the birth control pill,
But it solves acne. What are you talking about?
of course it does, Dianex, right? But then I hear you, Omar. But again, the question is, why do we have acne in the first place? Some teenagers, you'll see them, they will go through that stage of acne, when it's just a few spots here and then. And bless them, at that age, they are more sensitive. They are more self-conscious in how they look. But there is a stage where eventually they outgrow the acne because their hormones are still finding a rhythm. And so prescribing a medication, sure, it helps. It might help their self-confidence. It might help them get them out this glitch. But once you've stopped the antibiotics, or once you've stopped the birth control pill, you can end up at square one where you started, or especially with antibiotics, that can create a whole load of other issues because of the microbiome. I mean, we know about the microbiome. We know so much more about it now than when I did my master's dissertation was in the microbiome, and it was like this thin. Wow. Now, if I had to do it, 23 years later, it would be, from the bottom, from the bottom up, because there's so much more known about the microbiome. And again, these medications also impact the microbiome. So we're not what seems to be more common is that we're not thinking about 10 years time. Or, when you get to sort of my age. And
everyone seems to think about right now, isn't it? Which is probably not, it's not. I mean, I've never thought of life that way. Maybe when I was younger, when I didn't think straight. But nowadays, you always have to think 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead. Like, how's this going to affect me? How's it going to affect my life? Isn't it?
Yeah, what are the long-term impacts? And I've said this before, I'm not against medication at all. If you need medication, you need to get out of that, sort of like a dip, so be it. Bus hits you and you need morphine, take morphine. Nobody's, you need to put a metal plate in your leg, put a metal plate in your leg. Because there's some people who will say, oh, I don't want metal in. I don't know about having a hip replacement because the metal, I might react to the metal, might get an autoimmune condition. And it just goes on and on and on. And I think also our mindset, if we think like that, we're just going to attract it.
Yeah.
But it's more about being aware of the choices that we're making. And I think it is changing. Medicine is definitely changing, especially since COVID. There are more people who are aware and will question, especially clients that I've had during COVID and since COVID, who will, but then you've got the extremes. They want the pill. They don't want to do anything else. They don't want any blood tests. They don't want to go and see their doctor because they believe the doctor's going to put them on medications, or they're going to find something because they work for pharma. There's extremes. I always believe, what, if you can get a blood test done on the NHS, go and get it done. Yeah. Find out what your ferritin levels are like. Find out what the iron's doing. Find your vitamin D levels, although that's another story.
And cholesterol as well is another story as well, isn't it?
Yeah, because there's other things behind some of the tests that they do, but just get a rough idea. I had a lady several months ago, and she was losing a lot of hair, felt really lethargic, and was also getting breathless. And she was saying, it's since COVID. And I said to her, when was the last time you did your blood tests? And her last blood test was well before COVID. Wow. And I said, and she said, oh, because I can't get an appointment. I, can't see my doctor anymore. I said, have you tried just turning up at the surgery, or just calling them, or sending them an email saying, I'm really desperate. This is my situation, or go to A&E. She ended up going to see her doctor, and her ferritin levels were very, very low, as well as her iron, her red blood cells. And, all she needed was just to increase her iron levels.
And for those that don't know, ferritin is?
It's a storage form of iron. Okay. So it's like the backups. If you run out of iron, your body will go and get the iron from the ferritin. Our body's so smart. It's got backups. I always say that with people who are now doing sort of DNA testing as well, because some people who do the DNA testing and they feel like, oh, they're doomed. They're going to get Alzheimer's. They're going to get dementia, because, there's all these SNPs that you can look for, which are amazing, because actually it's more about prevention. But some people get so alarmed and they start, sort of worrying about, oh my gosh, but actually this is about prevention. You find out that you've got an issue with, say, lipid metabolism. You then know you can improve your diet, you can improve your lifestyle. I've got a SNP in one of my antioxidant enzymes, which means I benefit from exercising, from particular type of exercising, so it increases my antioxidant enzyme. And it's just wonderful to, and yeah, you might think, well, doesn't everybody need to exercise? But actually, there are some people who have some of the SNPs that create more inflammation. So it's supporting their inflammation. So, you know, for example, if somebody's going to become an athlete or decide that they're going to go professional with basketball or some sport, you know, it's a great way of knowing how to prevent injuries, you know, long-term injuries that might have a long-term impact. So it's not about, oh, you know, scare tactics. It's just about becoming more empowered. So
Definitely.
the understanding, and it's the same with medications. I mean, some clinics now in England on the NHS are now doing DNA testing for medications to see which medications will actually suit you and which ones won't, that will produce side effects or
That's
more long-term
amazing. That's
yeah.
amazing. And it's interesting you say that, because when I went for my blood test, when I mentioned to you earlier, for the listeners, I was saying to Kush earlier that because of her post saying that, you know, take a blood test, it's free, why not? And I was like, "Do you know what? Actually, take it while it's free anyway, because we know what's going to happen soon. Is you're going to end up paying for it, probably, isn't it?" When I went there and I was waiting, and a patient came up to reception, and I was actually pleasantly shocked by this, because I overheard. He's like, "Oh, I've been getting some side effects with my statin, and the doctor said for 2 weeks to come off it and see what happens." And when I heard that, I was like, "Wow, that is a good sign." Like, the doctors actually thought about it, said, "Okay, it might be the statin, no matter how much money it makes them." And it's taken off and to see what decided whether it is because of the statin.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, that was quite profound for me, because it just shows that, okay, there is a change happening
Oh,
somewhere.
there's definitely a change. There's definitely a change. I mean, there's a conference in June, and it was I can't forget the title. It's ran for 4 days, and there were a lot of doctors there, a lot of like yoga teachers, or people from all sorts of backgrounds, and it was really a lot to do with functional medicine, so like nutritional medicine. And it's really interesting to see how many doctors are moving that way, because I think some of them are seeing, you know, there's only so much they can do on the NHS and their hands are tied. So I don't even think, you know, we should be, and there's no blame to anybody. I mean, you know, I've got, again, when I post on Facebook as well and talk about a certain medication and every, you know, farmers making money. And, you know, I'm still of that belief. I still, you know, call me naive, whatever, but I still do believe that farmer is doing some benefit. You know, we end up in A&E, we need surgery, we need an anesthetic, you know, oh my gosh, can you imagine what it would be like now? But watching, you know, I don't know whether you've seen the series Painkiller. There's a series called Painkiller.
So guys at work have spoken about it. I'm just so busy. I don't
Yeah.
really watch Netflix or TV at all, because I'm
Yeah.
just like, I'm so focused on what I want to do. But
Yeah.
when I'm doing like assignments and stuff, it's on in the background, and I know the story anyway. I'm sure you do know the story, so it's like I'm just seeing it in live action. That's the
Yeah.
difference.
And I hear what you're saying. I find what was, again, watching it thinking, gosh, is this possible that some people think that it doesn't matter what the drug is about, it doesn't matter the side effects, let's just cover them up and just make money, you know? And yes, it's true, there is greed. See, the naives, there is greed and people do this. But the question is, always ask the question, is there an alternative? Is there an alternative to the pain medication that I'm being prescribed? What is the pain medication doing for me? What is the pain that I'm in? Is there a reason for the pain? Is there another way of working with the pain? And especially, I mean, thinking, you know, opioids is so addictive. And that was the whole, you know, the whole series is on addiction and what it's, and how many people died from becoming addicted and the overdose. It was actually, I mean, you don't go away feeling great, you know, you do feel it does.
Yeah.
If I did
That's
not
what
do
I've
what I
heard.
do,
That's what I've heard. Like, everyone who's watched
yeah,
it, they don't feel great after watching it. And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
interesting the feedback that I heard about that Painkiller show,
series, yeah,
that series, and they were like, "I can't believe this happens." And my response was, "It happens all the time." And is this went one in one ear and out the other, and which is expected. I'm not,
Yeah.
I don't make a. Back in the day when I first got into this, I was like, how can it's like, can you not believe this?
Yeah.
Like, how can you not make a big issue out of this? But now it's like, you know what? Let people be how they want to be. There's gonna be people out there who are interested, and if they are interested, I'll answer. I'll speak to them, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's always even clients who are on medication and they don't have any they don't want to come off their medication. They just want support, unless we find out, okay, do you know your X, Y, and Z is creating your itchy skin? And this happens. Itchy skin is one of the side effects of, especially when somebody's taking quite a few medications, they can start getting side effects from the itchy skin, from the medication, which can be itchy skin, which is normally, again, from a naturopathic perspective, we see it as a liver thing going on. They can go and get their liver test done. And again, Omar, we talk about, when I said, and I encourage people to do that, go and get blood tests done regularly, because they're there. The NHS, where everybody pays their taxes, they should be making use of these tests. But you don't have to do them, every couple of months. But some women have found out by having their tests done, they feel better because somehow their TSH levels were high, which is thyroid. And I've just written a blog on that, actually, just a few days ago.
I've read it.
But, again, it doesn't mean just because their TSH is high that they should go on thyroxine. There's so many things you can do. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a thyroid issue, but it actually allows the person to say, okay, I'm not going crazy. There is something here. This is why I'm feeling really tired. I've done all the intermittent fasting. I do I do this, and they're not losing weight, and they're feeling tired, and then they're feeling low. Then why not stop?
Yeah.
Reset, rethink what else might be going on. Yeah, and a lot of the time, there is a lot of stress around. There's so much of this hypervigilant state now. People are, and again, overused about fight, fright, freeze and fawn, but they're living in kind of this hypervigilant state. And again, it's about, okay, being mindful, self-compassionate. Why are we doing what we do every single day? When we wake up in the morning, what are we doing when we wake up?
Yeah.
Again, I mentioned this to one of my clients just last week. She did a test called the Dutch Plus test, and again, she did it because of her hormones and the stuff she's going through with her hormonal changes. And we went, and the biggest thing that really screamed out at me was her morning cortisol awakening response. Now, the cortisol awakening response is, so naturally in the morning, our cortisol spikes in the morning. That's called the cortisol awakening response. And it's a healthy response. It's what you want. When you wake up in the morning, you naturally wake up. You're not kind of walking into the shower with your eyes closed, having a shower, and then waiting for your coffee, and then suddenly you become awake. This is what's supposed to wake you up, and that is from the adrenals. That's your healthy adrenal response. Now, her cortisol awakening response was sky high. It was off the charts.
And what test did she take to find out about that?
It was actually a Dutch Plus test.
Oh, right. Okay.
You can do it on its own, but on its own, it doesn't give the bigger picture. You don't then actually learn about the adrenal, the overall adrenal reserve. Okay. So,
hold on to that thought, because I know you got so much to say, and I haven't even introduced you to everyone yet. So let's just take a step back. Who
am I? No.
And before we do that, I want to say congratulations, because recently you were promoted to Auntie G, weren't you?
Yes.
For the listeners that don't know what that was all about, and from a South Asian background, for those listeners who are not from a South Asian background, could you just explain what that means?
Yeah. So I can't even remember. Oh yes. So we went to see the sisters. They're from Pakistan. They were amazing. They did their show was amazing, and so it's really the audience was mainly South Asian. And then at the end, we went to, my husband was going to use the loos. And so I was waiting outside, and these youngsters walked by, and one of them accidentally trod on my foot. And he said, "Oh, sorry, Auntie G, sorry, Auntie G." And that was the first time ever somebody called me Auntie G who doesn't actually know me. So yeah, of course, I've got nieces and nephews and cousins who call me, Auntie G or Mossy G, whatever. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I've been promoted. Which basically means that they sort of saw me as an elder, and the G is kind of like a sign of respect. And it made me laugh because it was so out of the blue. I'm just waiting, and it was just amazing. The music was amazing. So I was a bit sort of slightly high in inverted commas.
Yeah.
And the way they just sort of put their arm, he put my hand on my shoulder, and I said, it's okay. But what really dawned on me, I thought, yeah, I've been promoted. And the funny thing was, I thought, yeah, because the other day, a few weeks ago, I went over to my auntie's house, and the first thing my auntie said as I walked in, she said, "Oh my gosh, you're grey." I'm like, you know, it happens to all of us. And she's older than, she's a few years older than me. And I said, it happens to all of us. She goes, diet, just diet. She goes, it doesn't look good. And I think, you know, it's that whole hilarious thing.
Oh, diet, not diet.
Yeah, dye your hair, sorry. Yeah, thinking of food.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? And that's the whole thing about being promoted to Auntie G, is you've got it. I've got the grey hair. I look older now.
You're at the next stage of life now, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it made me smile, but also sort of made my heart warm that somebody who's didn't know me but of the same background, that sign of, you know, not just like, oh sorry, know, sorry, but it's sorry Auntie G, sorry, you know. It's just such a, I don't know how to explain it, but it's heartwarming at the same time as well.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I've been called Uncle G yet, but if it does happen, I'm just gonna embrace it, because I know some people out there who just think, okay, I mean, I guess if you think you're young, that's, you know, props to anyone who feels like that is fine. But for me, it will come to a stage where, you know, someone's gonna call me Uncle G or Uncle, how you doing? And it's like,
it was lovely. It was lovely.
Yeah, it's a nice thing, isn't it? It's a nice thing. Yeah. Okay, so if you want to let the listeners know who you are and your credentials and what you've done before and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I am Khush, and more than anything else, I'm just a human being like everybody else. We laugh about it sometimes, because I say to my boys, because they're sort of influenced by some of these social media people, and I said to them, I said, you know, at the end of the day, they all put their underwear on, you know, the same way as we do. There's nothing different about them. And then, oh God, you know, here we go again.
Here we go with the lecture from our parents.
Yeah, but yeah, so I'm Khush, and I basically, how have I ended up what I'm doing now? So I'm a nutritional therapist and a homeopath. I'm also just recently qualified as a coach in pain therapy. And my background is basically, it's science-based. It was in the sciences. My first degree was in pharmacology and biochemistry, then went on to doing a master's. And then really what sort of where I had that a bit of an epiphany was when I was doing my PhD. My PhD was in cancer research, and it was pancreatic cancer, and it was at King's. And towards the end of my PhD, I just really it was really hard work. I have to say, it's not, you know, it was 7 days a week because I was growing cell lines. So it involved going in at weekends sometimes. I remember getting stuck in New York with my then not husband. And what happened? We were snowed in. And I then had to get in touch with the lab and with a few of my colleagues saying, I really need your help, because we need to feed the animals and also keep the cell lines growing. And when I say cell lines, so what I was doing, Omar, was when my professor would get patients with pancreatic cancer, because that's the cancer we were specifically working on, or my PhD was specifically on, they would be in surgery. So he'd be removing the cancer. That's what he's doing. He's a surgeon. And once they removed the cancer, I would collect it. I'd go and have my gear on, and with liquid nitrogen flask, collect the cancer, put it in the liquid nitrogen, bring it back to the lab, and then try to grow the cells.
What does it look like? The cancer? What does it look like?
Just like a mass of tissue, really. Nothing different.
What is it? Is it black? Is it what color is it? Like, I'm just curious.
Just the normal pink color, maybe a bit of white in it. Nothing different, really. That's a very interesting question.
So you picked it up. Yeah, I'm just curious how, because we all say, oh, this, you know, that you got cancer and stuff like that. Yeah. But you were actually taking it out and taking it to another lab.
And also, cancer is growing, right? If it's growing, it's going to have blood vessels. It wouldn't really be black unless it was dying or there's something else wrong with it. But generally, it's like any sort of flesh. And bring it back to the lab, and then, you know, try to grow cell lines from it. So try to grow some cells from it. Sometimes the cells grew, And it was great because then we could test which was there a particular medication that would stop the growth of the cancer cells. That would be brilliant, but it didn't work that way because I was looking at particular drugs that were blocking what we call cholecystokinin B receptors. Didn't work for any of the cancers that I managed, those that I did manage to grow, those that didn't grow. So, and that was it was a full-time job. It really was. Even going at weekends, make sure we change the medium of the cells that were growing in the Petri dish. So a lot of hard work. And
sounds exhausting.
It was exhausting. It was actually exhausting. And I look back and I think, oh my gosh, would I ever do that again? Not in the same field, I don't think, but I could easily do a PhD, I think, again, because it's just you're doing something that you're passionate about. Choose a subject that you're passionate about, and it doesn't feel like work. But it was the fact that we, with my professors, or people were flying over from different parts of the world as well. Anyway, so long story short, towards the end of my PhD, I was feeling a bit like, okay, got to write it. Just write the thesis, because it was then really hard work. And then editing it, sending it to your supervisors, getting it back was a big deal. Those who have done PhDs probably understand what I'm talking about. And then towards the end, I was given a book called A Time to Heal by Beata Bishop, which I still remember to this day. And secondly, in those days, we didn't have Google or any of that. I think it was Ask Jeeves or something. I typed in.
So funny. We were talking about that last night at our barbecue yesterday. It was Ask Jeeves. I think Yahoo had one, and there's one with a dog that we just couldn't remember what it was called. Those were the days where
I thought I was that old, but I'm glad other people remember Ask Jeeves. But it was really interesting because I even remember where I was sitting, the chair I was sitting in, and I was the only person left in the lab that day, everybody, because it was late. And I was just thinking, okay, I've got to really, and I was writing my thesis as well, which was hard, which wasn't, you have to be really inspired. And it really helped that I was running out of money, funding money. So I had to get my thesis done. I typed in pancreatic cancer and vitamin C. That was it. And I thought, I didn't know what to expect. I had no expectations. Lo and behold, all these research papers came up. I'm thinking, no, impossible.
But what made you put in vitamin C into the search box?
Okay, because I had read. So some people. So I started speaking with people about cancer, and some people start talking about, oh, have you heard about the Gerson therapy in Mexico? And if you go on, start doing fasting and juicing, it cures cancer and what have you. Now, hear me out here, Omar. I thought that was all just quackery, ridiculous. How can you just juice and fast and cure cancer? Okay. First of all, and I'll always believe that it's the body that does the curing. Okay, it's the body. No practitioner can say to you or me or anybody else, yes, I can cure your cancer. Yes, I can cure your rheumatoid arthritis. It's not us. It's not the practitioner. It's the individual. It's their vital force. It's the nutrients that they take. It's the environment that they live in. It's the relationships that they have. It's the chatter between their ears, it's all that. We are just like a vehicle, we just happen to be the vehicle. But so that was one, and also the book, A Time to Heal. So once I typed that in, there was no going back. Either I choose to ignore it and then I thought, right. So I started chatting with my professor, started chatting with a few of the people in the laboratory. And one of my colleagues was actually, her PhD was on prostate cancer and looking at PSA levels. So do PSA levels actually give you an indication that that person has prostate cancer or not?
What is PSA levels? What is PSA?
Prostate specific antigen. So it's a protein that can be high when the prostate is inflamed, when there's something going on with the prostate. It's not necessarily that there's prostate cancer. Okay, so but what she was looking at was a link between PSA and prostate cancer, but also once you take the biopsy from the prostate cancer, does it increase the risk of the cancer spreading? And I think it was still dubious. But since then, there are papers to say that the cancer can spread. It doesn't mean it'll spread in everybody, but there are papers to say that the cancer can spread from taking the biopsy. And And so what happened was, and they were just saying the same thing, get your head down, just write the thesis, you're nearly there. Because we're all in the same boat. We're all exhausted. We're all, got to the point where we've got to write our thesis. Our money is running out and we've got to get it done now. And most of us, my PhD was the hypothesis was proven negative. So cholecystokinin B wasn't involved in the growth of pancreatic cancer. There you go. And it's harder to write a PhD that's negative, than say if it was positive. So as I started writing my PhD, I then typed in this pancreatic cancer and vitamin C. It wasn't just I could have typed in anything. Nowadays I might type in pancreatic cancer and antioxidants, okay, because vitamin C is also an antioxidant.
Yep.
But what I discovered was the New York Post had this big article on Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, and Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez was called a quack. He was in this is what and then I thought, okay, you know what? He's working with pancreatic cancer and he's doing all this nutrition stuff and it's all woo-woo. Maybe I shouldn't go down that way. But something didn't sit right because there were other papers on vitamin C and generally cancer. Long story short, I sort of started looking up his work and what he's doing, but you couldn't really get much then on the internet. All I could find was that he was called a quack. Anyway, but he's working on the same type of cancer with his patient. And he actually was a qualified mainstream doctor, qualified in mainstream medicine, and then kind of went in inverted commas alternative. I just actually heard his team speak in June, and his wife spoke. His wife, who's now a widow, spoke about his work, and she's carried on the foundation, and they're carrying on with his work, which was wonderful to hear. And what he was basically doing was working out people's metabolic type. So do they do better with meat or with vegetarian type diets? So it's very personalized, and it was, what we call biochemical individuality, so individualized, and also a lot of detoxing. The patients were also doing coffee enemas, so there's quite a lot going on. It's very intense. But
we'll go into how coffee enemas work for those that don't know, because when I found out, I was like, and I said to my sister-in-law, because there was a show on ITV1, and basically they did a coffee enema where the celebrities went into like some sort of like retreat, and they actually showed it how it's done. And and it seems to give good results, but it's a bit strange way of, like, I do wonder, like, who came up with the idea, like, oh, let's try this. You know what I mean?
I have to say, I haven't dived into that though, but it was, I know people use it to help with detoxing. Some people feel awful afterwards, like they might get shaky because they're losing a lot of minerals. So it does vary. And I think it's about being mindful. Are you working with a practitioner? Are they then looking at your nutrient levels? How is it impacting you? Because to be honest, I think doing any detox without understanding why you're doing it and where you're at before, where you're at afterwards, it can be quite irresponsible in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely do it with someone who's done it before and knows what they're doing, because if you do it by yourself, you're just asking for trouble, because you never know what's going to happen, and then you might end up having to go to hospital or something like that.
Who knows? And the other thing is, the safest detox is cutting out sugar, cutting out alcohol, cutting out all your sweet foods, cutting out your white refined carbohydrates, balancing your blood sugar. That's your best detox.
Yeah.
And then at the same time is, detoxing, thoughts, mind, working on mindset.
But I want to ask you a bit about detox a bit later, because that's one of my main questions I wanted to ask. But on your journey to where you are now, like, what kind of challenges did you come across along the way?
Okay, so just quickly, I just want to finish that off, because so I discovered about Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez and his work with pancreatic cancer. That then made me think, right, there's something here. Why would he get such backlash as well? And there's published papers about antioxidants and cancer. So that got me on my journey to actually ending up doing my master's in human nutrition in the US. And it just happened to go that way. My husband was offered to start an office in New York. And the course that I was eyeing up while I was in London, I had no idea I'd end up in the US, was in Bridgeport, in the University of Bridgeport, which was like a 2 hours train journey. It was one weekend a month for 2 years, similar to the course we run now. And I tell you, I met the most amazing people, but at the same time, I met also some really challenging, because I had met a nurse who was on the course, because they really already had a nutrition background, most of them. I didn't have a nutrition background. And although people think, oh, well, you had your PhD, you had your blah, blah, but it wasn't nutrition based. You know, this is all very mainstream kind of medicine, mainstream thinking. We were looking at genes. We were looking inside the cell, in the genes. We weren't looking at the whole person, nothing like that. So one of the students on the course was actually from Philadelphia, is a nurse, or was a nurse, was training to be a nutritional therapist, was working with a doctor that was working with kids with autism. Now, this is all new to me, okay? I turn up at this course and they're all talking this lingo that I'm just like, I have no idea what they're talking about, but okay, I'm going to learn all about it. And we used to stay over at the weekends in a hotel, because we'd travel, we'd stay, and we all connected. And that's the beauty, again, you know, which I love about the school that I run, is that we're learning together, because the connections I made and what I learned from each of the students and their journeys. There were mums, there were fathers, there were people who were running natural health food stores. And remember, this is, you know, the East Side, and also people from New York, people from Philadelphia. So well read. And this nurse was, and I said to her, so are you telling me that you've got a doctor, you're working with a pediatrician who's, you know, trained in nutritional medicine, and he's working with kids with autism, and they start talking? And she said, yeah. I'm like, wow. I still was thinking, yeah, okay. You know, kind of in one ear, out the other. Okay, yeah, I'm here to do this. I'm just going to stick to. But as over the 2 years, we all got to know each other. We got to discover some of the mums who had emergency C-sections whilst they're on the court, and, you know, how it all went not according to plan. And then they were taking probiotics. This was the early days, right? This was when probiotics, the microbiome, was all very exciting and new and something magical and what have you. And so through that journey, and understanding that actually what I got myself into was way bigger than what I thought I was getting myself into. And then I, you know, qualified, and then started to practice in New York, then moved back to this country when I was pregnant with my first child. And from there on, it's just been, and I thought, do my master's, set up practice, that's it. But you know what? This journey never ends. You're always learning. Always learning. So
what school did you qualify from for the nutrition therapy?
So it was Bridgeport University. So they do also a naturopathic sort of doctorate course, a 5-year course.
Yeah.
And they had some brilliant lecturers. I'll never forget, one of the teachers was a chiropractor, and he put up a slide on the screen, and he said, right, does anybody recognize the ingredients? And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, I recognize those ingredients. And he said, and so I put my hand up, said, yeah, I recognize them. He said, so, okay, where do you recognize them from? And I said, I used to use them in the lab. And he said, okay, so what did you use them for? So I explained that when I do, make gels that we used to run the DNA samples on, and there's formaldehyde, there's all these. And I said, and he said, how did you use them? Did you wear gloves? Did you wear, I said, yeah, the formaldehyde, we used to, had to weigh it out in a fume cupboard and wear, gloves and a mask and everything. And he said, okay. And then the next slide. And then he said, do you know where they found? And of course, some of the students are saying, yeah, I was like, well, I didn't know what they're talking about. So he puts the next slide up. He said, this is also in some of the thinking, nah. See, I was still thinking, okay, either I'm in a cult or I'm just not with the program. Not that there is a program. There's no program to be with, but it was just eye-opening. And so I think I used to come home every weekend, and David would just go, and it's just because it was just too much for me. It was, and I'm thinking, well, why doesn't everybody know? If this is truth, if this is real, why doesn't everybody know about this?
Anyway. It sounds like in your mind you had two worlds colliding, from what you've learned and then you had what you're learning, and it's just like,
yeah. And I also have to say, moving over there was a big challenge in itself, because it was winter. anybody who knows me knows I don't like winter, although I know seasons are
Oh,
important.
New York, winter New York's nice, no?
Do you
I've been
know,
there.
it was nice, but I think going in the winter rather than, and then
Ah,
they
2 hours
have,
journey as well, right?
yeah, and but they have I mean, when spring came, spring came. When summer came, summer came. It's not like here where it's all kind of blended into, it was beautiful. And it felt like we were there just shy of 3 years. And felt like a bit of a holiday because one, I was on a journey of this discovery of nutritional medicine. And okay, does that mean, but everything I learned, for example, when I did my degree, when I did my master's, we learned the Krebs cycle, which is kind of the cycle that sort of eventually produces ATP, which is our currency of energy via the electron transport chain. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but I learned the Krebs cycle inside out when I did my degree. I knew every single substrate in that Krebs cycle. But when I did my master's, the nutrition master's, and then we did the Krebs cycle, I had no idea that toxic elements can block the Krebs cycle, that B vitamins are important for the Krebs cycle, glutathione is important for the Krebs cycle, your gut health is important for the Krebs cycle. It was like,
Yeah. Like, why hasn't this been applied to my master's, but it's been applied to my
right,
degree?
right. So, and even now, when I look at some of the courses, so my older son has been doing, he's done a year at a university, I'm not going to mention it, but he's doing a year in sports nutrition and sports science. Oh my God, the curriculum. I just, can you imagine adding in all the Krebs cycle and all the stuff about the chemicals and the cofactors and how minerals are important and the salt, the importance of salt and cell salts, all of it. It could just, anyway, that's me. I get sidetracked. So long story, so I ended up so I started practice in New York, then I moved here, started practice here, and I also started teaching in various nutrition schools. Really loved it and never looked back, and have now, started my own school. And what I did notice though, Omar, over the time, and especially being a mom and having had two boys, and you probably understand, growing up in a culture that was, very strict on girls, especially girls. And I joke about this on my social media. I've just posted a few days ago about, when your parents say to you, we'll arrange your marriage once you finish your education, and it's a photo of a really old woman. I was just thinking, it was, in a way, it's not either you get an education, it was literally you're being raised to be somebody's daughter-in-law and somebody's wife. And for some reason in my head, and I don't know why, I am the oldest child, but in my head, I thought, I'm not doing that. For some reason, deep down, is that I'm not doing that. I'm just not doing that. But now raising two boys, that are, again, I've got two younger brothers, and seeing the way how I grew up as an Indian girl and they grew up as Indian boys, we were treated very differently. And and this is not about my parents, this is just about the culture, the way it was then.
Yeah.
Now, when you have a boy, when they used to have a boy, they'd give out these laddus, these sweet things saying, we've had a boy. Everybody would know that you've had a boy.
So in my culture is like, because I've got two girls, and you get a lot of meat and just give it to everyone, like a lot.
And and I think, and yet when you have a girl, there's no laddus, there's no sweets going around, right? And now I know it's different. I don't know whether you've heard of the Pink Laddu charity. They're amazing. They make pink laddus now for when the girls are born, so they give them out. I mean, there's also, but then now raising boys, I've had to do a lot of this work here, what we call the inner work, raising boys, and also boys have been challenging, because for me, the teens were, just never rebelled until later on in life. It was all very good girl stuff, A grades, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now, having gone through that, and also seeing practitioners, I also see practitioners in clinic who are really struggling with their health, but they're not looking after their health. They're looking after their clients. But what about us? We're human beings. Are we looking after our health? What are we doing? And that's why even with the school, we've integrated the coaching, because the first year is all about the self, your inner self. So it's called the inner coaching. It's about, what is who am I? Who are you? So a lot of students, when they join, we know what we want to do. When I did my master's, I knew I wanted to do nutrition, something to do with nutrition. What I was going to do with that, I wasn't really sure. So I didn't think about, I'm going to be self-employed, I'm going to do this, going to do that. It was just, this is what I want to do, and then see what happens. But I think now a lot of people have this idea that, I want to practice, I want to become a practitioner. A lot goes into becoming a practitioner, Omar. A lot, first of all, it's about us.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this course? Is it really about becoming a practitioner? Okay, if we're going to become a practitioner, people are going to bring their stories. Where do we go? Where do those stories go in us? How do they affect us? And do we believe that they're affecting us or not? And then some people will say, yes, you surround yourself, you do visualization, surround yourself with light, you prepare yourself before your client, before you have a session. Fair enough. And that does work, where you're mindful and then you have breaks in between.
It's like counseling, isn't it then?
It can become like counseling. I mean, I have to say with counseling, because my husband is a psychotherapist and he does counseling, there is a big difference, but they are the ones who are really sort of need a lot more support. And even as coaches, there's so much that coaching can do, because some people will come for the nutrition. Absolutely. They'll come for I've got clients who will do the Dutch Plus test. They've already done the test, the Dutch Plus, the DNA, the microbiome, the oats test, the mycotoxin, and they've spent thousands. Okay. And first of all, you've got to ask the question, where is that coming from? Why do we have the need to spend thousands on all these tests? There's anxiety behind there. How do we then address the anxiety? Because part of it is, if we don't feel safe, how are we going to heal? So, and again, there's a blog on the school website called the Cell Danger Response. And I don't know whether you've heard of Robert Navio's work. His work is fascinating. And part of that cell danger response is, if your cells are feeling that they're not safe, they are in danger. It's, for example, you're in the kitchen, you're having this session with me now, somebody breaks into your house, in the door, through the back, they're taking your kids. You're not going to sit there talking to me, are you? You're going to go and chase them. You're going to get your kids back. You're going to run and fight. Yeah. It's the same with the body. The cell danger response, our cells are not going to just sit there and carry on producing ATP and thyroid hormones when there's somebody come through the back door and threatens you. Might be an infection. It could be mold, but it could be actually your mindset. Could be that you're feeling scared. So it's addressing the whole person. Yeah, and I've had a client who's actually, I referred her on to a coach, and because I've been working with her done a couple of sessions, and her thyroid levels have come back within healthy range and her symptoms have improved after she's integrated the coaching alongside, because she had this whole view, this world view that the world is not safe. And it wasn't obvious. It wasn't like she's having panic attacks all the time, but she had this thing that there's something not right, there's something wrong. And she was constantly, your cells don't know the difference between a physical toxin. So, we talk about detoxing, whether it's physical, whether it's mercury, or whether it's mold, or whether it's a toxin where you're thinking, okay, are my children okay? They're not home yet. Oh, just all those thoughts.
Okay, so toxicity can come into many forms. So what is toxicity exactly, for people that don't know? Because when I first looked into it years ago, I used to just be like, oh, that's poisonous. And then they'll just be like, well, I'm eating it, I'm not dead. So then I've changed my wording to like, oh, that's toxic. And they're like, okay, but I'm still not dead right now. And this is what we were talking about earlier about, oh, people are thinking about the right now, not the later on. Yeah, so if you could explain to the listeners, what is toxicity?
Okay, so...
Because you've just mentioned that it can come in many forms. It could be toxic thoughts, toxic... Your cells don't know the difference.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because you're saying you're thinking of something that's much more acute, that's poisonous, and you can, like, for example, getting food poisoning. Look at the reaction people have when they get poisoned by food. Your body is then reacting to it because it's then detoxing. The throwing up, the diarrhea, the pounding headache, the sweating, that's your body detoxing. It's trying to clear it out. So anybody who's been food poisoned, they know. Okay. Now, you've then got other toxins, which is something that the body perceives as not as foreign. Okay. It's something that's foreign to the body. It says, okay, this is not me. This is not something that I recognize. And so you've got some toxins that are at a much lower level, and they can just persist in the body. Yeah. Your body might produce a reaction. For example, somebody might have had, I really don't want to go particular route because it's not what it's about. So what should we use as a toxin?
Aspartame.
Okay,
Aspartame.
Yeah, okay. So say, for example, somebody has aspartame. And some people, I say, they're absolutely fine with aspartame. They don't have any reactions whatsoever. I have aspartame, I will get a migraine. Within an hour, I will have a migraine. And I know when something's got aspartame, it's like my body, I can sense it. Really weird, but that's what happens to me. Now, if somebody's having aspartame and they're not reacting, it doesn't mean it's, well, healthy, it's not. Okay, it's made in a lab. I always say, if it's made in a lab, we've really got to question it, and we're putting it in our body. Okay. Now, but if somebody's having it continuously and over the years, it's going to go somewhere. The body's going to be trying to clear it out. It's working with it because it's not natural. Now, so say, for example, you have aspartame and you don't react to it. I do. That just shows it doesn't work for me. My body's saying straight away, it's not good for me because it's clear. For you, you might think, oh no, and you're fine with it, and you take it for years and years. But aspartame is now also known to affect the microbiome. So it may be later on, 10 years down the line, you might have an autoimmune condition. I'm not saying I'm putting it down to aspartame because people are going to start saying, I've said aspartame creates autoimmune conditions. I'm not saying A creates B, because it's most chronic conditions, actually, I think all of them are multifactorial. Okay. So over the years, it's going to affect your well-being, but it's one factor. So it's like a bucket. Imagine a bucket that's filling over the years. Okay. So a typical example is like, I heard Dr. Brady talk. I mentioned this again in June, where the Gonzalez team came as well to speak. And he said, it is not a given now that you have a healthy baby is not a given. And, sitting there and thinking, it was actually like a slap in the face because I never saw it. I do see unhealthy babies. Absolutely. Eczema, asthma, reflux, silent reflux, can't sleep, colic, irritable, all those. But the fact that it's just when he said it. And I don't know whether you've heard him speak live.
I love the way he speaks. I've heard him on a podcast. I'm like, mate, I wish I could be like you. Like, so straight to the point. Like, he doesn't give a crap what anyone thinks. He's like, yeah. This is how it is. This is what you need to do, and this is what's happening. And that's it. I love it. Right. I love it.
And he was refreshing in that respect, because I thought, he's Italian, because he says that. He said it, I'm Italian, so you'll get passion. And he's great. He's incredibly inspiring as well. But and also it was research paper after research paper, he's quoting, backing up everything that he was saying. And I thought, he said, now think about it. And it's true. When women fall pregnant, he said they need a year now to detox, a whole year. He said to have a healthy baby now, and this was him, you need a year to detox. And I'm thinking, okay, but if you think about it, if you're born in a generation that's grown up with antibiotics, then you went on the birth control pill, or then you had antibiotics for acne, and then you went on the birth control pill, and then you're not exercising, fair enough. That I totally get that. But what he's saying is that now babies, when they're born, they might have reflux, or they might have they get an infection, they get bronchiolitis, they're given antibiotics, or they're given Gaviscon. And then as they're growing, next thing you know, they have another antibiotics because of gonorrhea ear infection. And then then they might have certain allergies to certain foods, or they've got eczema, then they put on antihistamines because the itchy skin. So that's like the bucket is filling. The bucket is filling. Now, once the bucket overflows, that's when the body's like, this is chronic now. The bucket's been filling since the day you were conceived, but I've been throwing out all these symptoms, saying, knock, knock, can you address this? Please, can you address the fact that you are, not hearing me when I'm crying, being a baby or whatever, being left to cry it out or what have you. Or, knock, knock, your birth was traumatic, go and talk to somebody. Not just, okay, I've got over it, I've taken, a homeopathic pill, or I've done this and that's fine, but actually really address the root cause. With detox, your liver, your kidneys, your skin, your sweating, they do it every day. Your body's amazing. We don't just keel over and die just because you've had aspartame, Omar, or I've had aspartame and I got a migraine. I get a migraine, my body said, okay, I don't like that, it's not for you. Can you stop taking it? I could keep taking it. I think, oh yeah, I love diet, whatever, and it's got aspartame or these sugar-free ones. But then I can take a paracetamol, I can take a painkiller and I can carry on. And I might have not made the connection either. Some people haven't made the connection. But what happens is once you've got to that tipping point, then they come and see a practitioner, or they've got a chronic condition. Autoimmune conditions are now on the rise. I've never seen so many autoimmune conditions that I have in the last year.
My last guest, her name's Rachna, and she talked about her rheumatoid arthritis and how she changed it. She went to remission by diet and lifestyle. And I've got another friend who's got an autoimmune condition where she has to go for injections every week just to keep it under control. So it's definitely on the rise. And it never used to be this big, like, I don't know, 20, 50 years ago. I'm not sure what the time frame is, but I don't remember it being this big. And I say I'm 33 now, so in the last 10, 15 years, I've never heard it being this big.
And you're 33 and you know about Arse Jeeves, hey? That's really great.
Good to know. Yeah. When I was in primary school, it was the coolest thing to do. Just ask Jeeves or something. And we had computers in primary school, so.
Right. Do you know, I think, and that's the power, right? The power of the body to heal. Because I get people they come with autoimmune conditions. Hashimoto's, the one with thyroid issues. It's so common, but it's absolutely, and I say inverted commas because the antibodies there are the antibodies there, but you can support the body to bring the antibodies down. And I've even had women who were put on thyroxine who've actually come off thyroxine with their doctor support because they're working on their health. And it's possible as long as your thyroid still is producing the hormone. Okay, but I think as the toxins build up, they are then impacting the body. They're stressing the body. And it's like you trying to work at home, you're trying to run it. So if I'm suddenly, somebody's come into your house, you're trying to do the podcast with me, and you're trying to grab the person who's come and taken your children, and you're trying to do the podcast at the same time. Something's going to give. You're going to collapse. Something's going to give. It's the same with the body. When the body is trying to do everything at the same time, it's going to give. And when it gives, it can be an autoimmune condition. It can be cancer. It can be eczema. It can be asthma. It can be any of those conditions.
And that's why toxicity is so important, isn't it, to think about, because all these issues can happen. Also, I would like to speak a little bit more about aspartame, because obviously it was been in the WHO mentioned it recently and is on social media about being, I think, potentially cancerous or something like that. So the feedback that I get from others is saying that, well, you'll have to drink a lot of it to get cancer, but it's not just the cancer you need to worry about, it's all the other things that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, and Omar, it's a great question, but at the moment, if there's no, and this is also, I have this thing in my head, when you said the two worlds colliding, sometimes if somebody says, even sometimes a student might say, so, is that A equals B, A plus B equals C? And it's not necessarily A plus B equals C, because our bodies are incredibly complex. And so, yes, aspartame, but who's going to prove that aspartame actually causes cancer in a few sittings of, with taking aspartame? It's the long-term buildup, and it's that bucket. So if somebody's having aspartame every day, 100%. But they are living a mindful life, they're eating well. Well, somebody who has aspartame, could they be eating well? I don't know. Say if the only thing that they're having is their absolute aspartame drink every single day, but otherwise they're eating really well. Okay, they're meditating, they're looking after their health, they're doing all the intermittent fast, whatever it is nowadays, it's the trend. And they're also genuinely looking after their health. Would they get cancer? Probably not. Okay, because actually it's not one thing, it's multifactorial. So that's where with research, we have to be really mindful when we look at, it's like when we take vitamin C out of context. Where in nature do we only get vitamin C, only get ascorbic acid on its own?
We don't,
Nowhere,
because it's been extracted from the outer shell of the whole
right?
vitamin C. So when COVID happened, and I was following a nutritionist called Patrick Holford. I don't know if you know of him.
Yeah,
And he did a lot of research openly saying how vitamin C, and that was ascorbic acid. But from what I understand is in emergency situations that can help.
absolutely. Yeah. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying that in when we're looking at research articles, so when we look at the science, sometimes you have to ask the question, okay, how how does this work in a holistic way, which is really difficult to do in science, right? How is anything holistic in science? Because if you're going to look at red meat, the impact of red meat on colon cancer, okay, but who's the person, who are these people that we're testing the red meat on, and where is their red meat from? How do they digest the red meat? What was their microbiome like before we actually gave them the whole population of people red meat versus vegan diet? There's so many factors that
Yeah.
we cannot really take into consideration when we're doing kind of human population studies. So that's why
Yeah.
bigger studies are important, and keeping an open mind, because when we take one paper that's suddenly blown out of proportion in the media and everywhere else, we've got to ask the question, okay, let's step back, let's have a look. And it's the same with vitamin C. Okay, you've got ascorbic acid. What is vitamin C? It's an antioxidant. Now, you've got, if you look at any standard sort of antioxidants on the supermarket, on good supermarket shelves, good brands, you will find they'll probably have A, C, and E and selenium. It's because they all kind of, it's that redox oxidation cycle. So they've all got to then keep recycling. So it's the bigger picture.
Yeah. Definitely.
Does that make
Definitely.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Detoxification pathways, because I know there's stages, aren't they?
Yeah.
How many stages are there, and what is
Uh,
a detach? Is there a lot? Is there a lot? Have I opened a can of
no.
worms?
You haven't opened a can. Do you know, the thing is, at the moment, it's really fascinating because we are so I'm really absolutely passionate about detox, and I say this to the students as well, and I always say this to my boys as well, because when they're teens and whatever age they are, they're going to go through that junk food. Everybody, it's cheaper it's cheaper to buy a can of Coke or whatever than it is to buy a bottle of water, all that sort of stuff. Now, with detoxification, first of all, we've got to remember we do it through sweating, right? We do it through drinking water. We do it, our kidneys, they're like filters. So there's loads of different ways our body detoxes. One of the key detox organs is the liver. And that's why, when some people are put on certain medications, they've got to look out for the liver. They check liver enzymes, because the liver is very important in detoxing your medications, in metabolizing your hormones. So that is generally a very, very important organ. But then I don't want to make it like, it's more important than the microbiome, or it's more important than the kidneys. They all work together.
Well,
Now,
it's the only organ that regenerates itself, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. So in detox, you've got phase 1, phase 2, phase 2.5, and phase 3. Now, the phase, you've got to work, it's like, imagine you've got your gutters, right? I'm pointing there because we've got the houses there. You've got your bathroom, the shower or whatever, and then you've got the drain pipes. The water runs through the drain pipes, comes out through the outside drain, out into the drain pipe, outside into the gutters and out. Now, if you think of detox, you've got to, first of all, we work backwards. Phase 3, phase 2.5, phase 2, phase 1. So phase 3 is the pooping. Yeah, are you pooping? Because if you're not emptying your bowels, if you're not urinating, you're going to get backed up.
Yeah,
So
I wanted to say, like, my daughter does ask questions, and she said, "Oh, I have to go to the toilet now." I was like, "It's a good thing; it needs to come out." And like, I think sometimes I think because she's only 5,
oh,
and I'm trying to educate her, like, you should eat this and you should eat that because of this. I don't give her too much, but she does say, "Oh, I've eaten this, but it's gonna come out right as well, right?" I was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, your body's gonna take the good things and take out the bad
yeah,
things. That's the main
yeah,
thing. As long as that's happened, that's fine." And
yeah.
she does get worried about that. I was like, "Look, don't worry. It's just a part. It's just part of the process of what you're talking
Yeah,
about."
absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? It's the thing is, and again, how many kids nowadays are constipated? How many kids are on Movicol because of constipation? And again, we've got to ask the question, why are they constipated? What is behind that? And, again, what to talk about? The second brain is in the gut. So our nervous system is in the gut. What is going on when that child became constipated? What was going on? You can even go back to something like birth trauma. Okay, so phase 3 is pooping. So if your drain, your outside is blocked, everything's going to get blocked up. Then, so that's your pooping, your sweating, so all your external channels, yeah? Phase 2.5 is your bile, your gallbladder. And that is just more recent. And I didn't even know it existed. I always go on about the gallbladder and bile. I bore the students to death. I bore people to death who are talking. And even we've got a webinar called the Dynamic Duo.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it soon.
But that's all, and it's not because let's just do a webinar for the sake of it. But it's so vital. And I've got clients who've actually worked on their bile, health of their bile, and they're pooping.
That's so interesting because a couple of years ago, my wife was having really bad pains around the stomach area and went to a hospital. And I think there was 3 specialists in front of us. They had no idea what to do. And it's so interesting. You have 3 specialists who have done, excuse me, that have done all the training and everything. They didn't know what to do. They did a scan. They found out that she had like 5 gallstones in there that were quite big. And then the doctor was like, we can either do keyhole surgery to take them out.
Yeah,
it's up to you, or we can just ride it out. And I said, well, what about diet and lifestyle? And they said, he said, we do have some. It's basically just like word of mouth research, like people have said it, where it's like a gluten-free diet might have helped. And I said, all right, well, we're going to try that, and did that. We did that, and it did help. But we went to see a homeopath as well, and he gave something, and he was like, this will get rid of it. And we didn't have any issues since then, but at the same time, I wouldn't say the lifestyle has changed at all much. So it's just a case of you're talking about, why has it happened? If you're not going back to the root cause, then you're just asking for it to come back, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're not necessarily asked. The thing is, you've got to ask the question, why did you have gallstones in the first place? And that, again, is quite common in the sense that when they go, so if you do a flush or whatever you do, or detox, it's still addressed. What is the root cause? Is that root cause? It might be that, your wife might be estrogen dominant, for example, okay? Or
she does have a thyroid issue as well.
Okay. So there's a bigger picture there, a bigger picture. I was going to say, otherwise it could be Apicorian, Samosi, and all our, fried foods that we love so much. But generally, there is always the body just doesn't produce gallstones because it doesn't have anything else to do. And it's like any other symptom, right?
There's a reason for everything that happens, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then it's like going, and again, that's where, the coaching is. So it's going back and going inwards and saying, okay, so what? Because sometimes your body, you will know why you've got the gallstones. You might say, also the bladder is connected to resentment. The gallbladder is connected to resentment as well.
Is that in Chinese medicine? It's
more in Chinese medicine, yeah. And it's really interesting because, we normally take somebody's very liverish, like they might be very angry or bitter. And at the same time, so the whole person is important. But so phase 2.5 is the gallbladder because it's the bile. And it's the bile also leaving. So it's got to come from, because the bile is made in the liver. It goes into the gallbladder, and it actually has to get transported from the liver to the gallbladder. That's very important. And then it sits in the gallbladder until the meal comes through, until there's some fat, and then it contracts. Now, bile is very important. The bile acids are very important. They help peristalsis.
And what is peristalsis?
Contraction of the gut, like that gut movement. Yeah. Okay. And that is, and can you imagine no gallbladder or really gunky bile? You're not getting good quality bile. You could become constipated because you're not getting that message to contract. And then the bile also affects the microbiome further down. So when you go up and then you go to phase 2 is, so you've got phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2 is basically the whole point is we're making something that's fat loving, water loving. So lipophilic to hydrophilic. And phase 1 and phase 2, that's the purpose. Phase 1 is all about oxidation and stuff. And then phase 2 is what we call conjugation, where you add on, whether it's sulfur, sulfation, glucuronidation, methylation. So then you're focusing on phase 2, then you focus on phase 1. The thing
Amazing.
is, you can definitely speed up phase 1 when phase 2 is blocked. So people will take certain supplements. Oh yeah, I'm taking this for liver because I'm doing a detox. And then actually they could be blocking because between phase 1 and phase 2, you've got like a waiting room. And once they've gone the chemicals, like for example, hormones, right? Or some medication, once it's gone through phase 1, it then sits to go into phase 2. Now, if your phase 2 is blocked, it'll sit and create free radical damage and oxidation and inflammation. So you don't want that happening. So you want to make sure that first of all, your phase 3, phase 2.5, phase 2, then phase 1. And some people, again, that's the beauty with detoxing, is you can do DNA testing now to find out your phase 1 enzymes, phase 2, and that's what they're looking at with certain medications.
Wow.
So before prescribing medications, if they do this DNA testing, they can have a look at where is it that your detox is stronger or weaker, and therefore you're not going to be prescribed that medication. Or for me as a nutritional therapist, I can say, yes, you'd really benefit from these particular supplements for your detoxing. Okay. And it's incredible, and it's not a negative thing, it's empowering, because you know specifically how to work, or that client knows then, okay, they're not going to go to whichever health food store they go to and end up buying bucket loads of vitamin C, when actually they might really need plenty of glutathione. So it depends on each individual, but that is, and that is something that's very, very useful.
Definitely.
Then you're not doing long-term, you are not doing harm.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Got it. So what kind of things can someone do to detoxify then if they're just at home and they've listened to this podcast and they realize, okay, I want to start making changes. So what kind of things can they do to start to detoxify?
So the best thing to do is first balance your blood sugar. Okay, your meals, all 3 food groups in your meals. Now, this gets so boring, and I say this all the time. Any nutritional therapist will, in their sleep, will be able to tell you how to balance your blood sugar. It's like, it's just now, kind of our natural language, our kind of mother tongue. And balancing blood sugar, why? Because if your blood sugar is yo-yoing, so say if you had your croissant with your coffee in the morning, there you go, you've spiked your blood sugar. And it's not about, and there's no judgment here. People love their croissants, they love their coffee, no judgment. It's what that does though, is it spikes your blood sugar. Then when the blood sugar's high, your body's like, alarm bells are going off, because we don't want high blood sugar. High blood sugar is inflammatory. And inflammation now is the big thing, isn't it? Everything is, every chronic condition, every illness, is the root cause is inflammation. I mean, that's like the next big thing, right? Inflammation. But it's not just inflammation. There's all sorts of other things. But if there's then high blood sugar, you get inflammation, and you're doing this every day, regular basis, and then say afternoon, here in England, you have a 3 p.m. or, afternoon tea with biscuits, it's that whole, again, another blood sugar surge. Again, I'm not just saying it's English thing, Indian, you have your laddus, you have your sweets. I know I've got relatives, aunties who are Auntie G's, who are on, who've got diabetes. They started off with metformin, all the medications. Now they're on insulin, because nobody's changing their diet, nobody's changing their lifestyle.
And that's the big thing about what I find is interesting is like in the South Asian community anyway, they take metformin and whatever medication might be given to them, and they're still carrying on how they've been living, thinking that this is actually helping or balancing something, but it's not.
And the thing is, Omar, it's again explaining, right? If you can grab that person, that patient or the doctor whilst they're in their surgery and say, right, these, and show them pictures of what happens if you don't control blood sugar, your toe can turn black, or you might just really, I think sometimes that works for some people, not for some. I'm not saying use scare tactics with everybody, but I think what happens is, and I know this from speaking to, aunties and what have you, they don't understand the complications of diabetes. They don't understand.
I think, like you said, seeing is pretty much believing. When I used to work as a court clerk, I used to be like, the guy to say, all rise, and everyone would get up. There was I think he must have been like someone who was meant to be in the box to speak. He was in a wheelchair and he had no limbs and no fingers. And I was like, I asked a colleague, like, what's happened to him then? Oh, it's a diabetes case. I was like, what? I was like, what? Diabetes, you can lose your fingers and legs and toes and eyes.
Eyesight.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
had no idea.
And you know, Omar, and this is the biggest thing, right? Balance your blood sugar. Okay, balance your blood sugar, your body will start detoxing because suddenly you've taken down the inflammation and the body, it's like you've got this person who's come through your back door. God forbid, none of this is going to really happen. I'm not going to bring it on either energetically, but somebody walks into your house through the back door, you're here doing a podcast, takes your daughters, and why am I saying this? I've just lost my train of thought.
Because I was talking about the guy that I saw in court, and he had no limbs, and you were talking about eyesight as well from
Right.
being diabetic,
Yeah.
and you were talking about how the body will basically
The
detoxify
inflammation.
itself.
Thank you so much. So the inflammation. So you cannot function. You cannot do this podcast with me whilst you're trying to also get your daughters and run after this man. So something's got to give. But if that inflammation goes down, in other words, you've managed to get your daughters back. The man's in prison or whatever, or being
He's in the bin. He's in the bin. I threw him in there.
So you now have got that energy now to come and sit back down and carry on with the podcast, for example, right? The same with the body. If there's inflammation because of this sugar yo-yoing all the time, your body's thinking, hold on, there's this robber in the back of my house taking my kids or whatever, there's no time to be doing the podcast. So there's no time for healing and repairing. I'm here, I'm running for my life. I'm in survival mode. So if that inflammation carries on, it's creating toxins. It's making the liver work harder. It's making your immune system work harder. It's the whole shebang. And so that's why when everybody, my ebook that first it was a paperback and then I turned it into an ebook. It's all about blood sugar balancing and the impact on the adrenals, the impact on inflammation, because it's so simple. So once you balance the blood sugar, your body will say, oh, I've got energy and I've got the resources to get rid of these toxins that have been sitting around for I don't know how long. So once you start doing that, and drink water and use real salt, not sodium chloride that is white and looks, just toxic anyway. It looks like a drug of some sort, but use proper real salt. You've got the French one, Granadas, you've got the Himalayan salt. It's about, that's what it's about. First of all, removing the very obvious everyday toxins, and they come in our food and they come in our head. So environment, how do you wake up in the morning? So that lady who had a really high cortisol awakening response, you know what she said? She said, well, in the morning, because she said, I'm getting the lunches together for the kids' school, got to drop them off at school. Then I've got emails to do when I get back because she works from home. She's running around like a headless chicken. How can you change your morning routine? Just simple things. So if her cortisol starts to come down by her just making simple changes, maybe make the packed lunches the night before.
It's what that saying always said when I was at university: fail to prepare or prepare to fail. Yeah. And it's true. Even what I've learned in my marriage, my wife is very organized, and I'm trying. I'm getting there. I'm not there yet, but I'm making changes. And if I was doing this podcast this time last year, I would have been that person, headless chicken, worrying about this, worrying about that, not planning things around this podcast and not planning around the kids. So we spoke about what kind of things people can do to detoxify.
So that, and Omar, not just sleep. Also going to bed. So how are you going to bed? An hour before going to bed, are you switching off all the screens? It's really, it's not rocket science.
It's not. That's why zebras don't get ulcers, right?
I love that book. Yes. So if anybody who's listening, if you haven't read Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, it's a brilliant read. It's absolute, and I think for the 21st century, it's a must.
I'm just going to do a quick bonus round. All right, so I want you to answer really quickly. You got like a second to answer. I do this with everyone. It's not just you. What was your first job?
Oh my gosh, I worked for a fast food place as a student.
Which one was it?
It was it's an indoor market. So it's indoor markets. It's just, I can't even remember the name. It was just it was fast food for some small company.
Cool. What three things can you not live without?
Oh my gosh. I would definitely say family, friends, community, oxygen. I know I'm being really, ridiculous here, right? And then the other one would be a chai.
Okay. What kind of chai do you like? Just a standard correct chai or normal chai or?
I like with ginger, black pepper, and the cardamoms.
Oh, my mother-in-law loves that.
I love them.
It's got a
It's
nice
just
hit
like
to it.
and it's like that warming. And also we grew up on chai. We had chai for breakfast, we had chai for evening after dinner. So
Yeah.
definitely.
I can't have chai. I can't have tea because I'll just stay awake for hours, like until like 3. Yeah, very, very delicate to caffeine, even when it's a decaf. So, my dad randomly said as well, like years ago, said when he drinks tea, he's up until like 3 a.m. as well.
Right. Okay.
So
yeah.
There's is that a myism? Is that what you guys call it in homeopathy? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, but I don't know whether that's a miasm. That just could be the way you metabolize. It could be also the tannin in the tea. Everybody, that's where the beauty is about, the biochemical individuality.
Okay,
right?
Brilliant. Yeah.
So, because some people can drink coffee as well at 8 p.m. in the evening.
Oh yeah, my wife can drink coffee late in the night, and she said she needs it just to make herself feel having a nice brew in the night. I was like, but that sleep coach said the other day, you know what I mean? There's a sleep coach that says, oh, you shouldn't drink coffee late in the night because and all. But she can sleep like a baby.
Yeah.
So
it's so unique to eat, and that's the important thing. Is I think we get so stuck on. Do this, and and again, people always get clients who saying, oh, I was following the parasite protocol. So some parasite protocol. And then everything.
And you have a thing about protocols, isn't it?
But I think it's just because we can't be put into a box. We're all so individual, and it becomes more and more clear as well as, the more and more clients have seen, it's so clear. But so for example, somebody did a parasite protocol and her hives all cleared up for about a year. Okay. And then suddenly they all came back and they're worse than they were. So what was that about? It's not just because somebody gets hives, it doesn't mean it's a parasite issue. But I think, again, we've got used to, if we're used to thinking the way traditional medicine works, we just then use alternative medicine in the same way, but then we become allopathic alternative practitioners.
Yeah.
What's
That's
the
right.
difference?
Which is not what we are aiming for. Okay, so what advice would you give to your younger self?
Gosh, I'd say just go for it. And the thing is, when you said that to me, what advice would you give for your younger self? I thought about, because we've said this to the boys. We've actually said that. What would we say if I was now your age? What would us go for it? Because there was this sort of, shall I do this? Shall I do that? Just go for it. Go for what you want to do. Because I think sometimes we just look back and think regret, unless of course you had parents who said, no, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah, I remember. So my daughter's starting to get good at drawing, and that's just like me. My oldest daughter was just like me, and my youngest daughter was just like my wife. And we're like very, very encouraging. Mm-hmm. So, we're like, oh, so do you want to do art classes or anything like that? And like, whereas my parents were like, no, stop drawing. You're not going to get anything from it.
Yeah.
And like, as I get older, I was like, bloody hell, like, architects, there's artists out there who are actually enjoying life.
Yes.
Rather than just like stuck with a 9 to 5. Do
you know, Omar, do you follow that, the Indian comedian, but she's in New York? She lives in New York.
Okay.
And we went to see her a couple of weeks ago because she was over in England.
Yeah.
And she was just hilarious.
I think you posted her. You posted her.
She was hilarious, Omar. I mean, to the point where she did talk about what you just said about. She goes, "Why would you want to be an artist?" And she's talking about arranged marriages, and she said, come to me, I'll arrange your marriage. Honestly, we were absolutely in fits.
Is it on YouTube? Could I catch it on YouTube?
No, that was live, right? So I don't think she would put that material on YouTube.
Okay, is she from New York?
No, she's actually from India, and she's done a podcast with somebody where she said that she's had death threats from people in India for her comedy.
Wow. Wow.
But
That's the
she's,
thing.
yeah,
I
just,
was told the other day, like, because they can see what I'm doing with the health spot stuff, and they're like, "Look, people are gonna say that don't do it, wasting your time. Just don't listen to them." And I was like, "Well, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing."
yeah,
But we'll get.
and medicine is changing. It's definitely changing. You go to these conferences now, in functional medicine. They've got doctors there. They've got midwives there. That it's changing. They have nurses. All people from mainstream backgrounds who they will say themselves, "I do not feel. This is not what I signed up for." That
Yeah.
they didn't sign up to write prescriptions or have 5 or 10 minutes with their patients. And I think that's the other thing now. Those who are going into medicine, I wonder if they know, what are they going to be doing after they've qualified?
Yeah.
How
Definitely.
many of us have thought that far ahead? Once I've qualified, okay, you might be guaranteed a job if you're going to be a doctor, because we're, bringing in doctors from all over the world now for the
Yeah.
NHS. But what is it that you want to do once you've qualified in medicine?
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
know,
Exactly. What is your favorite meal?
um, I know this is going to be hilarious. I love roast dinner.
Oh, so do I. So do I.
This.
We used to have one like twice a month, every Sunday. It's a bit calmed
Yeah,
down a bit because we've just been busy, but
yeah,
we'll probably bring it back up soon.
yeah. I mean, yesterday, so this weekend, my husband was away. My older one was doing double shift, so I still made a roast on Sunday, and it was me and my younger one. We both sat down and had a roast, and my husband got back, yes, and he said, "You had a roast for two?" I said, I love a roast.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love a
yeah.
roast.
It's
Sunday,
so comforting on a
yeah,
Sunday as well. I just
yeah,
love it, and my daughter loves it, or my wife, and we all love it. So
yeah,
it's something to do together as well. Because these days everyone's so busy. I know I talk a lot about with my clients as well. Like do things together. It's
yeah,
really important because we work in silos in our day jobs, and then it's like we work in silos in our at home as well, which I've learned a lot over the past couple of years living in a divorced household and everyone doing their own thing, and now I have kids myself, a wife as well. You start to realize that, oh, this is actually really important because
absolutely.
when my kids grow older, I don't want them to be like, oh, being together, doing things together is not important.
Yeah. Yeah. And mealtime is important, isn't it? It's that like now we, do actually cherish the time that we've had together, sitting down, everybody together to have meals. Although they can be quite stressful, when they're younger. I don't want to eat that. He threw food at me, and it can become a bit stressful. But I'm so glad we stuck it out rather than say, oh my gosh, go and eat in your, like I'm not saying that people do that, but go and eat in your room, or you can go and eat on your own, because it's so important. And now we do, when we sit down and we have such a laugh,
Yeah.
such a laugh when you eat. And now the same children that were 5 now suddenly 20 and 16, and you can still have a good laugh at the dinner time, but they will now eat everything as well, which is wonderful,
Yeah, that's
because they
it.
appreciate it more.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Your favorite book?
Gosh, that's a really difficult one.
You mentioned a book earlier at the beginning. The one I think you said that made you start thinking.
Oh, Time to Heal. I
Yeah,
think
I thought.
that had a really a profound effect on kind of the direction that I took in my life. Um, I have to say I did love Of Mice and Men, even though it was quite eye-opening, I think, especially
In
at
what way?
school as well. Just the whole hierarchy, the way the whole system was, and I didn't really kind of connect it in the whole as the bigger picture. And
Yeah.
I do remember studying that at school, thinking, oh, this is interesting. And then also it did kind of make me think about, again, I'm saying this to you being South Asian, it did make me think of the caste system as well, because I remember in those days, when my parents used to talk about, oh, so and so's got arranged, her marriage has been arranged, and oh yes, he's from X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z was the religion, the area, and the caste. And I remember when I read that book thinking, it, it's so true to life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy. It's
yeah.
crazy. What's the current book you're reading?
I do not read a book. I
Okay.
read books.
Your favorite place to visit? Oh, I thought you actually froze then because you weren't moving.
No, just in my favorite place to visit. Do you know, we've just been to Lisbon and we absolutely fell in love with it.
Wow.
And I wouldn't say that it's a favorite, but it was one of those places where you said, because I don't know if I've been I'm not necessarily the type of person to go back to that place. But we said we've decided to go back because it was that, I don't know, just the culture, and the weather was perfect. It wasn't too hot, too cold, but also just the history as well. I think we made the most of the time we were there as well. But I would say New York is you know, I love New York. I'm not so sure post COVID, but really, really wonderful city, wonderful place, Manhattan.
What are your top three supplements for detoxifying from toxicity? It's a hard one because I know we talk more about lifestyle changes,
you know what?
but what kind of things would you say would assist? Because we
Okay, I know. So from that question, Omar, my instantly I go to, okay, who's this person? Okay. So the first thing, as soon as you ask me that question, I'm thinking, who's this person? Now, if this person is not pooping, then I wouldn't recommend, I would sort out why they're not pooping. So supporting phase 3. If the person is pretty healthy, doing well, then maybe, adding something like glutathione, because glutathione is, it's the most potent antioxidant. And if you've got more oxidation because you're detoxing, it'll support that. Maybe making sure that again, supplement wise, milk thistle can be really great. And also my big thing would be, how do you support the gallbladder? Because I really do believe more people have gallbladder issues than we thought that don't, because people usually wait till they're symptomatic to address their gallbladder. But I think that plays a really crucial role in not just bowel movement, but in detoxification.
What kind of signs can someone think about when they think about gallbladder issues?
The most common ones are usually, having that pain right hand side, or waking up in the night thinking you're having a heart attack and it's shooting up your back as well, between the shoulder blades. That's gallstones. Okay, that's where there's blockages and there's lots of inflammation going on. But if somebody's, if they're constipated, they don't have regular bowel movements, or they've gained weight and they don't know why, or they've got weight around the middle, like the beer belly, or if it's women, they've got cycles that are not regular, but they are actually struggling with a lot of pain, or heavy periods in men. And then again, if you think about it, and generally if people are eating a lot of fried foods,
does that include processed foods as well?
Yeah. So, processed foods generally across the board for any stage of detox. But if you think about what is it that makes your gallbladder or gunks up your bile, and it would be any of those foods, the foods that aren't foods.
Brilliant.
But I think things like, having ginger in your meals, having herbs and spices, because they can also help detox without adding in strong supplements. There's a big thing now with the gallbladder, and D-limonene, which is like lemon essential oil. But again, it's individual. I actually had a client who read up somewhere about D-limonene, took D-limonene, and came out in hives all around her mouth.
Yeah.
So outside, by her chin, and it was a reaction to the D-limonene. So it's really hard to say what would I suggest. And any kind of whole food that's maybe something like spirulina or chlorella. Again, I would just say it does really depend on the individual. Okay. It's cool. A really hard one.
Yeah. Cool. What does health mean to you?
And this isn't my quote, but I love it because it's true. Health actually, to me, and I really believe this because I see it, and I can see when people get stuck, it's the ability to adapt to change. So whether that change is your body adapting to an environment that's more, say in inverted commas, more toxic or more healthy, it's the ability to adapt. Being spontaneous, or just having that flexibility. Yeah. So that's it, both physically and mentally. so that shift. Yeah.
Brilliant. And where can the listeners find you?
Okay, so they can find me on, I think, so there's two places. One is the New School of Nutritional Medicine, which is newschoolofnutrition.com. And we've got a Facebook page, and we've got an Instagram account, and we've also got a YouTube channel. And the other one is Dr. Khush, which is on Facebook, and my website, drkushmark.com, and also on Instagram. I do want to add, which is really important, because it is clear on my website, but some people are getting confused. I am not taking on new clients. So I've got a team that is taking on new clients. I am seeing old clients that are returning and current clients. And that's it for now, because I'm really, it's since COVID, it's gotten really busy. Yeah. And I think that was the other reason is, we need more practitioners out there who are practicing. Because there are people, and since COVID, there's people who are on more medications now. They've got gut issues, long haul COVID. So those are the places. But generally, I'll post a blog every now and then on Facebook or on Instagram, and then we've got regular posts on the school social media sites.
Hi everyone, thanks for listening. Had to abruptly end this call by this point, as Khush had a call and had already given me 2 hours of her time. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we got many more coming up. So please can you like, share, follow and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Speak soon.